Stumbling around. Hello. Oh, I can see now.
There we go. Cool. It's starting to cloud up, huh? That's good. It's a privilege to be able to share today. I love this house and I love my spiritual family. Been a good week. Rob and I ministered out at WSP on Friday night. One of the guys out there, brand new guy, his name is Levi, by the way. The family's from Riverton. It's a mama with 3 kids. And she had a brain aneurysm. She was in Salt Lake City. It's a sister, and they're getting ready to pull the plug. So remember, this guy's name is Levi Miller. And I visited with the chaplain that's covering the facility there, and he shared with me, he said he's feeling, you guys feeling really, angry, frustrated. But man, he came and the brothers ministered to him, and I was amazed at the song service out there, because Robin was thinking, man, I wonder, given how he feels, is because the songs were kind of upbeat, but it was really what he needed, and it was way cool. So remember, if you would, Levi Miller and his family. I think there's that place up in Riverton there, the depot. His mama works there. So anyway, I want to share about maturity today. I read an article this week, and it's kind of interesting in the article, because it's really an indictment, as far as the American church is concerned. And the article from a well-known pastor that has a national audience, and he said this is really an issue for the American church. And I believe, as I look out at our little group here this morning, I believe that God is raising up a remnant of overcomers. The remnant of overcomers is going to have to become mature. We're going to talk about that quite a little bit this morning. And there's a lot of things that are indicators of spiritual maturity. You know things by fruit. We often talk about that. You never look at an apple tree and question what it is. You don't look at a peach tree and question. I wonder down there in Grand Junction, those Palisade peaches, walk up to one of those trees where they only have peaches you bite and it dribbles plumb down to your arm. It's so good. They say, you never say, I wonder what kind of a tree that is. You recognize things by their fruit. Maturity, and one of the signs of maturity, one of the marks of an overcomer, is knowing how to love unconditionally. And our ability to love depends upon our maturity level. God has children. And sometimes God's children, not just people that just barely got born again. Sometimes God's children have been coming to church for quite a long time. And no children are born mature adults. We see that with Noah and Lily. They're cute little rascals, but they weren't born adults. They're babies that are in need of growth and learning. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that he should go. When we look at history, anyone who has studied history knows that our world today is filled with injustice and suffering and tyranny. And we have these ideas of maybe why. Well, it's, because they're of this particular political, group, or what they're the Washington insiders, or whatever you may have, as a prejudice. But under both our secular, our civil, and even in religious leadership, even in the church is filled with, at times, injustice, suffering, and tyranny. And you may be old enough to drive a car, and you may be old enough to vote or run for office, but folks sometimes lack some serious emotional or spiritual maturity. When I look at, our present political climate, we're headed towards midterms, right? And so gas prices are mysteriously coming down. I just wonder how that happened. I'm in awe. And, promises are being made. And of course we had the thing with Malargo, and I just wonder if it might be coincidence. And what we see is there are people in office with extremely selfish ambition and self-serving lifestyles. It's kind of interesting. I think there's a neighborhood of 4 million bureaucrats in our nation, and we're a nation of over 300 million. We are by far the majority. But anyway, their immaturity and inability to govern well is actually really very obvious. If you're not blinded by your prejudices. It's kind of interesting when I look at the God of the Bible. The God of the Bible comes to to serve and not be served, right? Yep. So the God of the Bible comes to serve. He gives his life. He loses his life for us, and yet we see the exact opposite in the leadership today. So I ask a question, because the Bible says, everybody knows, God says we're going to rule and reign with him, right? Is that not what, you can read the first chapter of the book of Revelations, and that's actually what it says. God said we're going to rule and reign with him. So I ask this question, is God going to allow spiritual babies to rule in his kingdom? I think you kind of know the answer. What would happen if he allowed spiritual babies to rule in his kingdom?
It'd be a wreck.
It'd be a wreck. It's like you're not going to allow your 10-year-old to drive your muscle car, right? Your 10-year-old does not get to run for political office. 10-year-old isn't going to be president of the United States. You know what I mean? And so here becomes the truth. Something has to happen first. And this is where this idea of maturity comes in. We have to begin to grow up and to mature. That's why I want to talk about this issue of love today with you. When you think of the word love, really in our culture, when you hear the word love, what really comes to mind? There's a 3-letter word. It's S-E-X. And that's really what comes to most people's mind when they think about love, right? And if you have some youngsters and they're in high school and they're falling in love, you call it puppy love because it's immature, right? And then there are friendships, and friendships is a kind of a love as well. And then there is parental love, right? And then there is self-sacrificing love. It's kind of interesting, and we've talked about this many times in the Bible. The Greek language, and you say, why do you talk about Greek? Well, Jesus didn't speak Hebrew. That's a shocker for some folks. Israel had already been in captivity. Jesus' main language was Aramaic. And he also, because of Rome and Rome brought their own language, and it was the Greek language, Koinonia Greek. And it's kind of like English today. I could go to Mexico City. I don't have to learn Spanish. I could go to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. I don't have to learn Portuguese. I could go to Bangkok, Thailand. I don't have to learn Thai. Now, if I went into the countryside somewhere, I would have to, but English works. English is almost a universal language. Well, Greek was almost a universal language of that day. Jesus was bilingual. He spoke both. And we're very shortchanged. We've talked about this when it comes to love in the Bible. It's like I've shared here and I share it out with the guys at the penitentiary. I love corn on the cob. Boy, they've had some of that Olathe corn recently down at City Market. And that is some of the best corn in the whole world. We'll buy a bunch of that, and Rob and I just sit down and have corn for the night, It's like corn on the cob. That's our whole meal. And I love country fairs. I love the exhibits. I love camping. That's why I look at Robin and say, Robin, I love you. And she says, well, do you love me as much as you like corn on the cob? There's this place where I'm wanting to define how much I love her. And so I say things like, I really, really, really love you. It's like, but in the Greek language, they have several words for love. And so we're going to talk about some of those today, and it's very interesting. It's going to be different than what you think. Okay, so first of all, we have this word eros in the Greek. And eros is never found in the New Testament, period. And eros is where you get the word erotic. And so eros is really this word that it's an immature type of love. It describes just really a physical attraction. The guys out in the penitentiary, they get out. Most of them they lost their relationship. They get out and they're hungry for a relationship, And so it's like they're not looking for a. I shared with them, and here it's like the first thing God gave Adam was not a woman. The first thing He gave him was a job, and then He gave him a woman that would facilitate the call, the purpose on his life. But most guys, all they're thinking is, dear Lord, did you see her? I mean, she is, woo, that's a hottie. That's kind of what rolls through. That's eros, and it's totally selfish. They're not looking at, man, this girl loves Jesus. You know what I mean? And this girl has incredible work ethic. And this girl is like, I'm telling you what, she is articulate and smart, and she really likes me, and she would facilitate the purpose in my life. Robin and I are partners. That's what makes our relationship fun. We're actually partners. And so, eros is self-love. And then we have this word phileo, and we've talked about it often. It's a higher level. It's describing what we would call brotherly love, or the proper love between a brother and a sister. We've all heard of the term Philadelphia. We know that Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania, right? Philadelphia comes from the word phileo. And what does the word Philadelphia actually mean? Anybody know? City of brotherly love. That's what it means. Philadelphia means city of brotherly love. So with the brother or the sister emphasis, it's largely, phileo is actually based upon a 50-50 kind of relationship. It's a judicial love that seeks to establish its own rights and its fair share. Consequently, phileo is conditional. If you read the Hallmark greeting cards, they're conditional, right? I love you because. Kind of funky, but it's the truth. I mean, it's like, I love you because you do all these things for me, but if you don't do all those things for me no more, then, it's like, this relationship is over kind of a deal. And so, God wants us to break past the barrier of phileo love. But I really believe in this breaking past this barrier, we need to understand a little bit more about phileo love than maybe we've never really understood before. So, siblings. Let's just take siblings for a moment. In this area of phileo love, they begin to learn the principle of property rights. That's what happens with siblings. It's like, I'm sure you've experienced this, you Joy or Titus in your home. I mean, this is my room, this is your room. You ask your brother before you play with this, or, you ask your sister. I mean, you begin to respect property rights, right? And so, children begin to fight for their property rights. And the funky part about being a parent is sometimes you have to be the referee. I've got to be careful here. It's like sometimes the parent is forced to be the referee, and kids really know how to manipulate parents. They do. I mean, that becomes an art, you know. But as time passes, what happens with kids is they learn to respect the lawful rights of others. It's not just something that you learn within the home between siblings. All of a sudden you're learning this for your peers at school, and you're learning this as it relates to your community. And then you get your first job, and you're working that job, and you begin to learn, you know, that there are lawful rights. You learn how to treat others, and you learn to treat them as you yourself would like to be treated. And that's good. It's a stage in development.
Yes.
But ultimately, to be fully mature, you have to learn to love unconditionally. And that goes beyond one's rights under the law. And by under the law, I'm not talking about just, you know, the laws of the mores of our nation, but the law. We have to go beyond the law. And that's where we get into these higher concepts of mercy. You want to understand mercy? You've got to understand this that we're sharing today. If you want to understand grace, you need to understand what we're sharing today. If you want to understand forgiveness, you have to understand this. And so, it's not that we despise phileo or the property rights or the idea of how we treat others or justice for all. And we're not called to fall short of the law in that respect, but we're called to go beyond the principles that are laid down by Jesus in the Gospels. And so, the third type of love, of course, would be what we hear of often is agape love. It's that love that's unconditional. And this is the love that John presents to us. I'd like to take and read with you John 13, 34 through 35. This is our goal. You know what a goal is, don't you? Huh? A goal is not necessarily something that you know is your norm, right? We all have our norm, but then we have goals in life. It's kind of interesting. You sit down in a Bible study with people, and it's like, can you write down or share what are your goals? We got a brand new brother here that's here today, and it's like, it'd be like, okay, it's like, you know, you work up at the hospital, and this is what you do, and it's like, and you know, you're looking at a career and a future. It's like, what are your goals? And so this is actually a goal. So it says to us in verse 34, I give you a new commandment. Love one another just as I have loved you. Let's go back. I didn't get to read it all, Fred. You got fast fingers. I give you a new commandment. Love one another just as I have loved you. You must also love one another. By this will all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And here it's talking about agape. It's not talking about phileo. It's not talking about 50-50. It's not talking about my rights under the law. He said, I'm giving you a new commandment. And it's only new in this sense. It's new because the law of Moses required phileo. We don't think of it that way sometimes. The law of Moses actually required phileo. It required phileo love in neighborhood relationships. It brought equal justice to everyone. It didn't require that I give up my rights for you. The law did not require that. Nowhere do you read in the law that it says I have to give up my rights for you. And the law would then define those rights and would always uphold my rights to what was lawfully mine or what was lawfully yours. It upheld those rights. And so Jesus says, I'm giving you a new commandment. How is Rawlins, Wyoming going to know that you have a relationship with Jesus? Is it because you pack a great big Bible, or you wear a cross, or you got a bumper sticker?
No.
Or is it going to be because
Of your actions.
of your actions? That actually says, I'm a disciple of Christ. And this is actually how I live. It is actually a lifestyle. So, it's kind of interesting. We think sometimes it's only the New Testament that requires me to love my neighbor as myself. The law was summed up in two statements, right? It's to love, God with my entire being, and then to love my neighbor as myself. And we think that's kind of almost like New Testament-y stuff, and that part is not necessarily true. So let's go to Leviticus 19:18 and just see what the law said. It says, do not take revenge or bear grudge against members of your community, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. Love your neighbor as yourself. But then the law comes, what the law requires, let me back up. The law requires me to love my neighbor as myself, but the law does not require me to lay down my life for another. That's going to be a part of a new commandment. Nowhere do you read in the Old Testament that I'm to lay down my life for another. Nowhere. It's not there. So, along comes Jesus in our story today. And he shows us by example how to give up everything. Even to go to the cross. In order to be a blessing. In order to bring salvation to other people. You and I are called to take and live out the example. He says the works that I do, greater works than these shall you do. And we're thinking about sometimes really what he's talking about is, I'm going to cast out the devil and heal the sick. I'm going to do the greater works. And he's saying, I'll tell you what some of the greater works is. That you would actually lay down your life, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Let's read John 15:13 really quick. John 15:13. No one has greater love than this, that someone would lay down his life for his friend. I'm a Vietnam veteran. My friend Ed is a Korean War veteran. So it's like, is it talking about just the guy in the armed forces that goes to, some foreign place around the world and he lays down his life? Is it talking about just the policeman, in his neighborhood that every day puts his life out there on the line, and especially in some of these inner cities? Is it talking just about him? No. And the answer to that absolutely is no. So when it talks about no greater love than this, that a man or a woman would lay down his life for his friends, what does really laying down your life mean? Well, it means this. It means I put others before me. That's what it means. It means I go the extra mile. It means the old covenant, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have to. Phileo was all about my rights. It was all about 50-50. It was all about, the guarantee of my rights. Liberty and justice for all kind of a thing.
On both sides.
On both sides. But now under this new covenant, this new commandment, it's Jesus is our example. He lays down his life for us. He comes to serve and not to be served. One of the last acts with his disciples is what? He actually gets down, he girds himself with a towel, so to speak. He gets down on his knees and he washes stinky, dirty right? In a day when there was just lots of dusty old roads and people wore a lot of sandals, and you get old and man, you look at some old people's toenails and it's like, dear God, make you want to take and lose your lunch. It's like, you know, they're not the pretty little toenails all painted up, you know. Huh? You're like, oh, you get down there and you get down and you watch that thing and it's like you lay down your life for someone else. You know, actions speak louder than words, don't you?
Yeah.
It's easy to say, you know, brother, I love you. You know, sister, I love you. But actions actually speak louder than words. James talks about our faith. He says faith without actions is no faith. It's like you show me your faith and I'll show you my actions. And my actions prove my faith. One of the things, and this is kind of a different spin today, as we continue this talk about maturity, I believe that most of our teaching on love actually puts the cart before the horse. We have a brand new Christian somewhere, we tell them, you need to love people as Jesus loves. You need to have that agape love. And they are totally incapable of agape love. They're totally incapable of loving like Jesus loved. They can't even phileo someone. They can't even love them that 50-50. They can't even love them with loving your neighbor as yourself. They can't even do that. So how can they ever agape someone? The truth is they can't. That's the absolute honest truth. They can't. Siblings, if they've never learned phileo love in the home, how can they ever? Because some kids grow up like weeds. How can you expect them in the culture to love someone like Christ would love? They can't. It's absolutely impossible. Some of what you watch on the 6 o'clock news shouldn't surprise you. Robin has girls in her bank that have grown kids that have graduated that have never spent a single day in God's house. It's like, how would you ever expect them to agape someone when they don't even know how to phileo? In Peter's restoration, it's kind of interesting. We've talked about this many times before. You know, it's not in the book of John. It's not the English language, again, shortchanging us. Jesus doesn't, and the conversation with Peter, it isn't this conversation, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, Lord, you know I love you. And Peter, do you love me? And Lord, you know I love you. And Peter, do you love me? And Lord, you know that I love you. And his heart breaks. It's Jesus saying, Peter, do you agape me? And Peter says, Lord, you know that I phileo you. You know, it's that 50-50, it's under the, it's, you know, all of, I love you as I would a brother. And he asks him again, Peter, do you agape me? Do you love me with this unconditional love? And we know that Peter had a wreck in his life, and we hear that sometimes God speaking to you and I. Elmer, do you really love me? And he asks him the third time, only this time he uses Peter's own word. He uses the word phileo. And he says, Peter, do you even phileo me? And at that moment, Peter's heart is broken. He knows the point of the conversation. Phileo love is very, very important. Phileo love guides you while you're growing in spiritual maturity. You need phileo. It lays the foundation of justice and respect for others that's necessary in most of life's relationships. You have to have phileo in your marriage. You have to have phileo in your home with your children. You have to have phileo in your workplace. You have to have it in your community. Learning phileo is actually like a prerequisite. You know what prerequisites are, don't you? I know that Eva does. I mean, you're not, if you don't take basic math, they're not going to take and stick an algebra class on you. You know, you're not going to take a geometry class if you can't even understand simple math. You got to have the prerequisites. You're not going to take a creative writing class somewhere if you don't know the difference between a noun, a pronoun, a verb, and an adverb, and whatever it may be. That's the truth. You're not going to go out here and take, you know, a chemistry class if you don't understand even a basic science class, right? It's like you have to have prerequisites. And phileo is actually a prerequisite for agape. You can never develop agape if you don't first understand and live out phileo. How can you love unconditionally if you haven't learned how to love conditionally? It's impossible. That's why God gave the law first. You had to learn the law before you could learn grace. It wasn't like God said, "Whoops, you know, I just made a bad mistake. I didn't get it right the first time, and so now we're gonna get it right this time." Okay? It's like, no, you have to learn the law before you can learn grace. So let's talk about this just a little bit more. How much do you really expect out of a baby? Babies are just meant to be kind of like little cute. That's about it, really. Huh? And to a baby, the world just revolves around them. Think about it. They only know what they want, and they have no thought of the need of their mother, of their father. You know, if the baby's hungry, feed me. See more? I mean, that's what you got to do. You got to feed me. If the baby has soiled himself, I mean, you got to change me. If the baby is feeling a little bit lonely, you got to hold me, right? I mean, and that baby doesn't care that mother was up all night long. She didn't get a good night's sleep. He doesn't care if his dad worked all night, all day long, and he's tired. It doesn't matter. He hasn't developed beyond that. It's he has no concept of living in somebody else's shoes. So let's take and apply this to spiritual immaturity. There's people that have no concept of living in somebody else's shoes. It's all about me. If I'm hungry, you better feed me. If I've soiled myself, you better change me. If I'm lonely, you better visit me and show up. We have consumer churches. And in the consumer church, they're takers and they're not necessarily givers. And so they go where they receive, right? And not necessarily where they receive, you know, the word, but the stuff. And so, baby Christians are recognizable by their fruit. We talked about that in the very beginning. How do I know somebody's a baby Christian? The same way I know it's an apple tree. The same way I know it's a peach tree. I look at the fruit of their life and I say, they may have known Jesus for all these years, but they're babies. They behave like a baby. I want to say something here. You know that love and discipline are not contradictory principles. They're not. Love and discipline are not contradictory. As a parent, you know it's not contradictory, right? I was so proud of Levi. I'm going to embarrass you probably a little bit, Titus. You know? But you know that I love you. You're a good example. I'm proud of your dad, Wednesday. I mean, he was probably a little tired. His Bible study. He had the video. You laid your head down on the table. And Levi, he was up there teaching the Bible study. He got up. He walked back there to his son and he went. Did he not? Huh? I said to Robin, I'm proud of your dad. Because love, I know your dad fiercely loves you. I know he fiercely loves his daughter. It's like, I know he fiercely loves Isaac, and it's like, and so love and discipline are not contradictory principles. If God loves us, guess what he's going to do? He says so in his word. He's going to discipline. He's going to bring correction. And he says at the time, no discipline seems like, woohoo, yippee, huh? It's like, no. It makes your eyes water a little, or you get embarrassed, huh? I mean, that's just simply the truth. In 1 John 4:8, it says that God is love. And it's talking about agape again. The one who does not agape does not know God, because God is agape. But it doesn't mean, this does not mean that God will not hold you accountable. It doesn't mean God won't hold you accountable. Because he knows you will never learn, again, phileo if he don't hold you accountable. And then you will never learn agape as you understand phileo. I want to read 2 Timothy 3:1-5. And I want you know, I'm using the HSB because I want you to, it's a modern translation, and I just want you to catch the words. And as you read with me, does it not sound like you're reading 6 o'clock news? And when you read it, you understand what is lacking in our culture at the moment and what God wants to grow in each of us. So it says, but know this, difficult times will come in the last days. For people will be lovers of self. Eros is self-love, remember? It's like, it's all about me. It's the lust of my flesh. They be lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, slanders, without self-control, brutal, without love for what is good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of godliness but denying its power. Avoid these people. It's not healthy. We need people in our lives that are like steel sharpening steel.
That's right.
You know, church serves a purpose. You know where phileo love is learned? Phileo love is learned in a family. That's where you learn phileo love. It's where it starts out as siblings. What is a church?
A family.
It's just a family. Is a family perfect? Huh?
No.
A family's not perfect. Does a family have flaws?
Yep.
Absolutely. They have strengths as well. Huh?
Yep.
There is a love for each other. There is a closeness. You know, the siblings may fight, but don't get in between them. They're still brothers and sisters. So family is where you actually learn phileo. It's in the family setting. And the church serves a purpose in that respect. That's why the Bible says, you know, as you see that day approaching, what day?
This day.
This day, huh? As you see this day approaching, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Because you really need each other.
That's right.
You need the love of your family to walk through these hard places. Here's what I'm learning. 75 years old and I'm learning. It's not an either or when it comes to phileo or agape. That's not what Jesus was saying to Peter. You know, Peter, do you agape me? Well, Lord, you know I don't. I phileo you. Well, it should be this and not that. What he's saying is it should be a balance. It's a balance. I need to learn phileo. We need to respect each other's rights. There needs to be boundaries. You know? There's principles under the law. We don't defraud, injure, hurt each other. But at the same time, I need to love like Jesus did.
Yes.
I need this balance. I need phileo operating in my life as well. I need the unconditional love I need to be able to exhibit these things. I need to exhibit mercy and grace and forgiveness.
Yes.
And I need to take in and surrender my life, my rights, my privileges at times. Not always, but at times I need to surrender those for my brothers and sisters in the Lord, and even for the neighbor next door that doesn't know Jesus. I need to surrender that right. Let's read together, as I get ready to close, Luke 14:12 through 14. And this in a way seems like, huh? What? How's that apply to what you're sharing? But just listen to it, would you? He also said to the one who had invited him, when you give a lunch or a dinner, because I'm telling you what's happening here in this passage, okay? This instruction from the Word shows us in a very simple way the terms and the principles of agape love, okay? So he says, when you give a lunch or a dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers, your relatives, or your rich neighbors, because they might invite you back and you'll be repaid. Next verse. On the contrary, when you host a banquet, now we can apply this stuff to so many ways. When you host a banquet, invite those who are poor, maimed, lame, or blind, and you will be blessed because why? You'll be blessed because they can't repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. They can't repay you. That is agape love in very simple language. We have people around us that when we step out and we love unconditionally, there is no way they can compensate us back. We extend the very things that we just talked about. We extend to them let me find it really quick here. We extend to them the mercy. We extend to them the grace. We extend to them the forgiveness. And we know they can't pay us back. But we know someday when we stand before Abba, and he says, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. You'll enter into the joy of your Lord. Got great things planned in the future. It's like, that's when the reward, the payback comes. And wouldn't it be nice if even in our loving people, we wouldn't even need this incentive in itself either. I'm going to love unconditionally, even if I didn't even receive any reward in heaven, huh? Because it's what I am called to be and to do. Have grown up. I become mature. So then God says, you're going to rule and reign with me. I trust you. This is how you're going to rule and reign. There will be a balance in your life with phileo. You will know the principles of the law. But you will go beyond the law, beyond loving your neighbor as yourself, to actually surrendering your life for others. Wow. I hope this today maybe settles a little confusion. My prayer is that this spiritual family will grow and mature. And love each other. And love this little community. Love the people in your workplace. Love the people that you come across in your day-to-day. And better represent our Abba in heaven. We hear a lot about his kingdom. We better represent his kingdom. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We have concepts there as well that I don't know. He's talking to us right here. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I want you to grow up and mature. I want you to be the remnant of overcomers. I want you to learn the principles of phileo. I want you to take and move beyond phileo, and then after you've learned this prerequisite, I want you to love unconditionally. I want you to have a balance in your life. I want you to represent my kingdom well. And one of these days, if you will do this, you and I are going to rule and reign together. I think in heaven, some people are actually going to go to school. I don't think biblically you can prove that everybody that got born again is going to rule and reign. It's the overcomer. What is the message to the churches in Revelation? To the overcomer. To the overcomer. To the overcomer. And that's the word to you and I. And so I believe you and I, in our journey, and what God's doing here at Harvestime, you know, out here on West Walnut, is to bring us into a place of spiritual maturity and growth, to better represent Him well. Let's stand together.